The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into Students of the Game. My name is Alex Baumann, and joined by my two co-hosts today, Nathan Glidewell and Oldenburg. March Madness is this week, guys, so we got to break down our brackets and all that. But before we get started with that, I know Gray is really itching to get talking about the SEC tournament and what transpired there. Nathan, probably not so much to do with what happened with the Alabama Crimson Tide and getting obliterated in their first game against Florida. Gray, I'm going to hand it off to you first because Nathan's probably going to have something to do with Alabama. Have a long conversation about that. So, but what were your thoughts on the SEC tournament and Auburn getting kind of the champion?
It was exactly what you want to see in a tournament for a conference that is that deep. In a conference tournament, you want to see the top three seeds get challenged like they did and get beat like they did. You want to see this competition that shows how deep the SEC is, and that's all this tournament did, showing that a 9 seed Mississippi State could play with the 1 seed Tennessee on any day, or showing with 6 seed Florida or 4 seed Auburn getting to the championship, and Texas A&M competing with Kentucky, and even the lower seeds, how good of games that we had in that one. So overall, I think it was a great showing. Speaking more on Auburn, because I know Nathan and Alex will talk more on the Alabama side of things. I think Auburn came in, was ready to play for 3 straight games, thinking that they were the best team in this tournament, and they showed it. Since the Kentucky game, Auburn's been very, very good and haven't lost since then. I'm not saying that they've played anybody super impressive. I think the most impressive team that they played on there was this past Sunday against Florida. But they've shown up against who they've had to play against and looked dominant in every game except for probably the Mississippi State game in the semifinals, which was just a rock fight. And that's what you expect in the SEC. But I think Auburn looked very, very good. They're playing the best basketball at the best time, and that's what Bruce Pearl teams have shown to do, is playing basketball at their best time as you get into March, as you get into tournament play. And I think they're poised to do some good things moving forward.
Nathan, any thoughts on Auburn before we get to Alabama?
I mean, I would say on the verge of being a very complete team. I think there's just a few things you could maybe nitpick, but they're right there. They're probably one of the best teams in the country. If you wanted to select them to be a national champion at the end of March and into April, I don't think that's crazy. I think they're built that well, and they obviously approved it in the SEC tournament and throughout their regular season. Besides a few marks where they kind of slipped up a little bit, but that's just what happens in college basketball. So they're a very good team. I guess it's time we move on to talk about Alabama. And
remember, Nathan, it's PG.
I always keep it PG, but look, we us as Alabama fans were fed a load of crap before the SEC tournament even started. Coming out the press, I believe it was Nick Pringle, said they were basically wiping the slate clean, kind of looking for a revenge tour. And basically Nate said if they don't defend, they'll go home. Well, that's what they did. They went home because they decided to give up over 100 points to Florida yet again. And it wasn't close after a very crappy second half showing. First half, they're right there in it until the 6-minute mark. They had the lead, and then it just like something in our brains did not click. And we let up like a 17-0 run to end the half. So that basically sums up Alabama basketball. Can't make anything this year. Latrell Wrightsell coming back from an injury. He still hasn't looked polished. Rylan Griffin coming off an injury. He didn't look good. Mark Sears, where you kind of put him in the leadership role. He kind of shrunk down in the moment instead of rising up to the occasion. I got to give the Florida team credit because they've been playing some of their best basketball as of late, and they can just flat out compete. And they had Alabama's number. They were just matched up so well. and they had a defensive game plan in there to start, and it just completely worked. You go back to the week before. I mean, absolutely shut down in Florida. So they knew what they were doing in Alabama. I don't know. It's hard to change your whole offensive identity and your whole defensive identity this late in the season. And that's just a flat out truth. This is simulated from the entire regular season, where at home we just continued to huck up shots. And even though we probably weren't being very efficient later on in the season, we just continued to do it and got by with it because we could make them at a high clip because we were shooting so much. Defense, it's really just non-existent. We prey on teams just missing shots and us being able to get the rebound. We don't force a lot of turnovers. We turn the ball over a lot ourselves. A lot of different issues that I can continuously go through. But obviously you see the result. Alabama lost in the first round of the SEC tournament after getting a bye. As far as this goes into the NCAA tournament, they don't have any momentum right now. I'm not saying they can't get any, but you would like to see them be able to do what Auburn just did and go ahead and run completely through the SEC, win the SEC tournament, and go into the March Madness NCAA tournament with some momentum. But that's just not happening. I don't know if this is the year. Like last year, it seemed like the year that flopped, and now we're here. Not saying I'm going to give up on my team, but it doesn't look great.
Yeah, I think you had a great point there, Nathan, about how you can't change your identity this late in the season. And for Alabama, their identity is they're going to shoot a lot of threes. They're not going to play a lot of defense. Nate Oates has called out this team multiple times throughout the season to sit down and guard somebody for 40 minutes, and it hasn't been done in any game this entire season, whether it was the Indiana State game earlier or the Auburn game later in the season. It never happened. And when they let these teams go on runs, it's like they get in their own head and they just can't do it. They can't come back. There's no fight to get back into the game. But you look at a team like Auburn, they go down, they get down and they defend really well, and they're able to come back in these games. So Alabama, I don't know if they can find the defenses late in the season and compete against teams in this tournament, whether they get out of the first round against, I think Charleston in the first round, and then get past that to the next team, whether it be St. Mary's or the team they play.
Grand
Canyon. I mean, they got to defend if they're going to get far in this tournament. It just remains to be seen if they're going to do it. And Nate Oates has implored this team to do it. Hasn't been done.
Yeah, the two huge differences between this Auburn and Alabama team, and obviously Alabama's offense is considerably more consistent and better than Auburn's offense, more high powered, I would say, especially on the top end with Mark Sears and Riley Griffin. When they're going, they're going. But the difference that we obviously saw in the SEC tournament and in specific games is on the defensive end of the floor. I think a lot of that comes with Auburn's depth. Auburn plays 10 guys, 10 plus minutes. The deepest team in the country. I think the only team that could be deeper is UConn, which I may see that in the Sweet 16 for some reason. We'll get to that later though, but that's the difference. Auburn gets down in guards, and you see the type of team defense that Auburn plays compared to the type of defense that Alabama's doing. They're not very efficient on the defensive end. They're not creating as many turnovers as they should, especially live ball turnovers. Like you create a shot clock violation or kick ball out of bounds or something, that's good, but that's not going to run you out in transition, which Alabama is so good at. And they have not been able to get that going. And you can't change your identity at this point because now it's win or go home. But for Alabama to have success, they've got to start defending well. They've got to stay on the defensive glass, and they've got to shoot well.
That's a lot of they've got to, and they haven't done a lot of that yet. I don't think I've seen a game where Alabama's played defense consistently. All 5 players on the court. Maybe Grant Nelson, maybe Nick Pringle.
He fouls that every night for some reason. I get he's trying. I get he's trying.
When you're trying to bail out 3 different guards that can't guard the perimeter, it's difficult for people at the center position.
That's what happens.
All right, before we get into March Madness, Nathan, we had Nate Oates get a contract extension. During
very ironic.
Right before the game, and they ended up losing. The contract extensions to make him one of the 5 highest paid college coaches in the country. Just before we recorded this video, it was announced that the contract will extend him through March 14th, 2030, and the annual salary will be $5 million the first year and escalate to $7.55 million by the final year of his contract, with a buyout increase as well at $18 million in the first 2 years. Nathan, did he deserve this contract extension, even though he did lose the Florida right after?
Yes, he did. I mean, you look at where Alabama basketball was before Nate Oates and where it is now. This
Avery
is like,
Johnson?
please don't bring his name up. But Nate Oates has done a fantastic job in improving the recruiting. He is pushing for better facilities. That hasn't happened yet, but I know it's on the verge. But just the overall composition of Alabama basketball has been 10 times better. I think we're going to our 4th consecutive NCAA tournament, which is incredible. The whole time I watched Alabama basketball before him, I think we went twice. And I was so used to the NIT before. I was like, where would we be in the NIT? But this is a lot different, and I love what he's done. And I think he'll continue to do great things. If there is a coach that can get us to the Final Four, I think Nate is the coach. It's just a matter of being patient. This contract locking him up basically for the rest of his coaching career, I hope, unless some bigger team comes in and throws the bag at him. But I mean, I gotta defend him where he's been right, and that's he's put up terrific numbers. We've won the SEC regular season and tournament like two to 4 times.
2 out of the last 4 years.
Yeah,
the other 2 were Auburn.
Yeah, exactly. It's more. It says more about the state of Alabama. And we'll talk about this in a minute. But it's just flat out impressive what he's done.
Amen. I know we will talk about it in a minute, Nathan, but I want to just get to the point. Just like you said, before Nate Oates, before Bruce Pearl, this state, its best basketball school was UAB, and it was not close. And there wasn't any competition there. And Alabama, Auburn were football schools, and locking him up for this contract extension, because nobody was going to come poach Nick Saban from Alabama, because Alabama is one of, if not the biggest football brands there is. It's the exact opposite in basketball. There are bigger brands for basketball than Alabama at this current moment. So, a bigger brand sees a really, really good recruiter and coach like Nate Oates winning championships in the SEC. They're like, well, we can get him from Alabama. They're a football school. Locking him up secures him away from that. That's exactly what Auburn did to Bruce Pearl 2 years ago. That's exactly what Alabama does here. I think it's the smartest move that they've done.
Yeah, I think it was too, because you had teams like Michigan fire Juwan Howard. There was rumors that Nate Oates would be up for that job. He said he wasn't. You never know with those rumors if it's going to happen or not. So getting him to get locked up under this contract extension, like y'all both said, prevents him from being poached by these big name schools that have the blue bloods or the new bloods that can come in and poach him. So getting him locked up prevents that hopefully from happening. We've seen stranger things happen with an $18 million buyout being bought out before. I mean, I know Jimbo Fisher was fired, but that buyout was pretty big. So, I mean, teams will pony up money to get the coach they want. I just hope Nate Oates doesn't leave, because like Nathan said, he's the best coach Alabama's had in a long, long time since Wimp Sanderson. So we had to endure a lot to get here. Some very, very bad coaches that we won't go through.
Very dark days.
Losing Norfolk State in the NIT.
Please don't, Alex. We're past this. Let's move on.
That's a great day. All right, let's get into the NCAA tournament here, guys. Do you think the committee got the bubble teams right? Because we had Seton Hall, Oklahoma, Indiana State, Pitt, St. John's, Providence, South Florida left out. But then you had teams like Florida Atlantic, Virginia, Michigan State, Colorado State, all put in the tournament. Do you think they got it right, leaving these certain teams out?
I want to speak specifically for 2 names on there, and Nathan, I may be stealing yours here, but Indiana State and Pitt should be in this tournament. First of all, Indiana State is the highest net ranking team that's ever not made the NCAA tournament. They're like net 26 or 27 or something like that out of 68. And we found 68 better teams than them. I know they didn't win their conference tournament, and that is, normally their conference is a 1-bid team, like their conference tournament champion. But they've been impressive all year. Even made the AP poll for a couple of weeks during the middle of the season. I just don't see where we put Virginia in there ahead of them. Um, Virginia was not consistent at all this year, not used to what we're seeing from Virginia. I think the only reason Virginia's in and a team like Indiana State or even Pitt are out is because the numbers on the front of the jersey. Um, and it's all about the ratings. It's all about money. We've been talking about that for so long here on this podcast. It's all about the money. I think this case kind of just proves it even more.
Yeah, I had two separate teams actually. So you're okay with taking those two. I'll talk about Oklahoma and St. John's. Oklahoma played in the toughest division, in the toughest conference. And they had great numbers overall. I forget what their net ranking is right off the top of my head. But having to play in the Big 12 and through that gauntlet, they played very good basketball. They were able to get some very good wins. I thought they were good enough to be in the tournament. I thought that out of the field, I thought they were one of the better teams, if not the best team in the field when it came down to the bubble. But it just wasn't looked at that way. And then you pivot over towards St. John's and Rick Pitino and what he is basically installed there already. And they were, I forget, I think it was versus UConn. They played them very, very close, and they looked very, very ready to be in the tournament and be one of those teams that could actually make a run because of the way Rick Pitino had them built this season. Their net ranking was also high. Metrics and KenPom were high. I know they probably didn't have as many big wins, but they definitely didn't have like any huge bad losses. And I thought that it was one of the teams that probably should have been in over a team like Virginia, which I think we can all three just sit here and say Virginia shouldn't have made the tournament based on what they've done this season.
No.
And great, you're completely right. It's a broken record at this point that it is all about the money. And Virginia, time and time again, will create more revenue than a team like St. John's.
Yeah, I think one team that I think should have made it in was Seton Hall. I don't think they were one of the last four out, but they were one of the teams that beat UConn this season. They were one of the three, and they had played pretty good basketball. Yeah, and you put them in, but you put in somebody like Virginia, who plays the worst style of offensive basketball I've ever seen. Wants to make me gouge my eyes out. I want to just get two spoons and just scoop them out. They're so bad offensively. Other defense is great, but wasn't there a game this season where they scored like 40 points or something?
Yeah,
it was pretty bad. I mean, I don't see that Virginia doing anything in this tournament. I think Seton Hall could have been a sneaky good team if they would have got matched up either in the first four or something like, or got an 11 seed or something like that. I think they would have been a sneaky good team, pick an upset. Also, Michigan State getting in over somebody like Seton Hall or Oklahoma. Michigan State was like North Carolina was a couple of seasons ago. Ranked as one of the top teams in the country. Terrible start to the season. Had an up and down middle part and then struggled to end the season. I didn't think Michigan State should have got in, but like I pointed out with Virginia, Michigan State got in because of the money they bring and the fact Tom Izzo's their head coach. It's just all about the money for that. But you look at the teams that didn't get in: the Oklahomas, the Indiana States, the Pitts, the St. John's, the Providence, the South Florida, Seton Hall. I think a lot of it comes down to their non-conference schedule. When they interviewed the chairman of the selection committee, that's one thing you pointed out too with the team specifically, like Indiana State, was the fact their non-conference schedule was awful. I believe they played Alabama. That was their only big thing, and they ended up getting blown out by them. Yeah. So in the future, teams like an Indiana State or Oklahoma or Seton Hall or these non-Power 5 teams, if they want to get into the tournament, they're going to have to schedule these Power 5 teams at a conference and try to pick up wins so they can build that resume up. Because FAU, they're not a Power 5 team, but you look at what they did in their out-of-conference schedule. They beat Arizona, they beat a couple other teams here and there. So that's one of the big reasons they got in. So when it comes, I think the thing that sort of popped some of these teams' bubble was the fact their out-of-conference schedule was atrocious.
Yep.
All right, so y'all kind of touched on it earlier. We were talking about Alabama and Auburn. What are y'all's thoughts on the four teams from the state of Alabama being Alabama, Auburn, Samford, and UAB making the tournament? I believe outside of Texas, it's the most of any state.
Yeah. So
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, so the state of Alabama, we've touched on this, right? We went back and forth on this earlier, where the state of Alabama was basketball-wise a few years ago, and now you're waking up today, or you'll be watching every single one of these teams play Thursday and Friday of this week, and it is kind of surreal. It's a surreal feeling. Alabama and Auburn, you kind of just expect them to be in the tournament now. I guess you could just attribute that to them having very good coaches. But then you look at Samford and UAB and what they've been able to do this season. UAB, uber talented. They're a little young, but they are very talented and well coached. Samford, they came out of nowhere this season, and they have been extremely well coached. And they are also talented. I think UAB and Samford not being as well known by most people. I think those are like your probable upset picks, and of course everyone knows what Alabama and Auburn can do. But just having 4 teams from the state is incredible, because this is definitely a football state. I mean, we can repeat this every single time. We can try to make it a basketball state, but I don't think it will ever be that. But it's so incredible to see 4 at the same teams in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's a surreal feeling, just like Nathan said. 10 years ago, this did not exist at all. Every once in a while, UAB would be in there because they would win the Conference USA, but that is it. Like, we never saw a team like Samford be up there. You definitely never saw a team like Alabama or Auburn. Alabama and Auburn, the 10 years prior to Bruce Pearl is when I'll say. So the 2003 to 4 to 2013, Alabama and Auburn were by far the worst basketball programs in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
Now both of them have 4 championships in the last 6 years in the SEC. So like, the state of Alabama is not only on the up and coming with the lower teams in this state. UAB is going to continue to be great. They're extremely well coached. Samford with Bucky McMillan, they're on the up and up. I mean, they're very, very good and talented, and they're going to give Kansas an extreme scare. And I think that's going to be a very popular upset pick. But now you just look at how dominant Auburn and Alabama have been in the SEC, and having them in the tournament these last 7 years, 6-7 years, has completely changed the state. And Nathan said, right, we're never going to be able to change this away from a football state. This state runs through the Iron Bowl, but basketball is by far the second best state or the second best sport in this state. And it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, it is a great feeling, especially if Auburn and UAB win their first round matchups, will be playing each other. That'll be something to watch. I think UAB has a lot of talent. I don't think they're going to keep up with Auburn, but I mean, who would think we'd be sitting here in 2024, and Auburn might be playing UAB in the second round of the NCAA tournament? We were looked at each other 15 years ago, we would have laughed.
That's only something you can like create in your mind.
Yeah,
because it is just
now.
Let's talk
Let's talk about 3 of those teams and the location where they are playing.
Yeah,
Spokane.
So what in the world? So the committee chair comes out. And I'm not even going to talk about Auburn seating because that's another show that we need to have. But the committee chairman comes up. Is actually the commissioner of the SWAC conference based in Birmingham. Comes up and said that during their seating process was the hardest they've ever had hardest one they've had in like 12 years since he's been there. It was real tough. They're up late nights. They really took into account the geographic location from mileage away from your home base. What? They sent Auburn, UAB, and Alabama to Spokane, Washington, 2,500 miles away.
I think Alabama and Auburn got screwed just because they played in Birmingham last year, and NCAA is like, y'all got that, so here we go to Spokane.
So now we're going to send you to the complete opposite side of the country. That's ridiculous.
It is what it is. It is what it is. They win their games, nobody's going to care.
That's right.
So take care of business, you'll be fine. All right, jumping into the NCAA tournament, guys. We obviously don't have 2 hours to sit here and break down every single matchup. No. But let's just go by the regions here and just break down some upsets we have, who we have making the Elite Eight and Final Four, and then we'll converge and then we'll do our championship. So turning down the East region, obviously have UConn as the 1 seed, Iowa State as the 2 seed, Illinois as the 3 seed, and then Auburn as the 4 seed. You have 4 conference champions in the same region, which is crazy considering UConn is the number 1 overall seed. So UConn really got screwed of anybody of the number 1 seeds.
That's very true.
So you're looking at all those first round matchups, guys. Do you see any possible upsets that you've chosen or you might choose going forward?
Yeah, I really like the first round. I'm going to let Alex and Nathan probably pick the UAB San Diego State game, but I really want to go to the lower part of that bracket and look at Washington State and Drake. Drake's on one of the
man is on it right now. That's my pick too.
Wow, I guess I'm the
Drake is on one of the highest winning streaks in the NCAA right now, winning their conference tournament in both the men's and women's. I think I don't like Washington State. Didn't they get blown out by Oregon or something like that? The Pac-12 championship, something like that. They got blown out by somebody.
Something like that.
If they shoot the ball very well, they could be good. But I really like Drake. If I had to pick an upset here, outside of maybe the UAB game, which I know Alex is going to talk about, I gotta go with Drake over Washington State as a 7-10 upset.
Nathan, what about you? You got any?
To be different. Like I want to pick UAB really bad, but I also look at their matchup against San Diego State, and I'm like, San Diego State has very constructive defense. I firsthand know about this, so I kind of I had to pivot that pick. I've been back and forth on this one because there's always been a 2-15 upset, and it's very hard to pinpoint which team can be upset at that 2 spot.
That's true.
But give me South Dakota State to upset Iowa State in the first round. I think it could be one of those teams.
Iowa State just thrashed you.
I know, but sometimes you can be riding too high.
Too high, yeah.
So I think it could be one of the teams that can do it. There's also other spots, and I think that's probably not the most common pick, but I think it's one of the picks that could surprise people. It's kind of similar to Arizona and Princeton last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to stick about UAB and San Diego State for a second, I think UAB gets the win there. I look at San Diego State. They're heavily reliant on a guy in Jaden Ledee to score a lot of their points. He was up for National Player of the Year. He's a really good player, not saying he's not good, but they're heavily relying on him, and UAB has a lot of frontline guys, whether that be Javion Davis, Yaxel Lindenborg, Christian Coleman, a lot of guys that can throw at a guy like Jaden Ledee and sort of force him out of the game. I think UAB is a lot deeper than a team like San Diego State. They have a lot more firepower. Yaxel Lindenborg, I think if he wasn't on UAB and say he was on an Alabama or something like that, we'd be talking about him being a potential first-round pick. He is that good at basketball. He's a good three-point shooter at the big man position. He defends really well, rebounds the ball. Great shooter all around, great defender. I think he can be the difference here. I think UB also has better guard play from guys like Eric Gaines. I know he struggled this season, but he's a great defender. We saw it at Ole Miss. They have guys like Vasquez, Ortiz, and Butta Johnson. All those guys had great games in their conference tournament, all riding hot. So I think UAB, with their guard play being, I think, better than San Diego State and the ability to shut down San Diego State's main guy in Jaden Ledee, benefits them well, I think, going into that matchup. I think that's why they end up beating them in that around a 64 matchup. As you go further down into the East region, guys, going into the second round, Sweet 16, do you have any upsets at all?
Well, I think Grady's gonna like this, or it's either kind of a jinx. But in the Sweet 16, I did have Auburn upsetting UConn.
I did as well.
I think that's very possible. I think that there's any team in this tournament that could upset UConn, I think Auburn could be the team to do it. And, I'm not trying to jinx them or anything. I just think they're that good.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one because I see where that's coming from. Auburn is the perfect team and the perfect matchup to upset UConn. I think that if there's one team, not just in this bracket, but in this tournament, that can beat UConn, it's Auburn because of the way that they defend and how physical they are. And Jani Broom's going to be able to play with Donovan Clingan, and they'll be able to get up and guard on the three-point line and not give UConn space like they got all year in the Big East, especially when they played Marquette and teams like that who don't have any business being a 2 seed. But Yeah, I could easily see that game going either way. I think the winner of of a Sweet 16 matchup between Auburn and UConn eventually advances to the Final Four. Um, but it is going to be hard for UConn to go up into Boston and play a team like UConn and win, and then play a team like whether Illinois, Drake, Iowa State. Nathan wants to have South Dakota State advance to that.
I'm not saying
It's
they're
going to be a
getting
hard
super
matchup.
far here.
Yeah. But it's a really hard draw for the Auburn Tigers. It really does screw UConn because, I mean, defending national champs and number one overall seed, the committee really did just say, well, the team that you'll probably be most scared to be matched up against, that could be your eventual Sweet 16 matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So who do y'all have, let's say, in the Elite Eight matchup here and then getting to the Final Four?
I guess I'll go first here. I had Auburn, Illinois reaching the Elite Eight. I like what the Illini have been able to do. They've been very good offensively. I know their defense has been good as of late, but they've actually been improving. I like the way they play in their conference tournament. Won a lot of close games, and they showed the ability to close out big games at the end of the day. And if they can keep riding the momentum, I think they would have a decently easy path. I had them playing BYU in the second round. I think that's a matchup they can win, just better offensively, and then beating a team like South Dakota State. I think that's given. And then I actually had Illinois beating Auburn in the Elite Eight, just basically riding momentum. They have great players. They're great offensively, but I like the way they've been improving on defense. I think it's kind of a sleeper pick. No one really picked Illinois because they've been shaky the latter half of their season. But I'm going to stick with them here.
Okay.
I've got to go chalk here and go 1-2 and go UConn and Iowa State in my Elite Eight. It's going to be very tough for Auburn to advance to the Elite Eight and beat UConn in the Sweet 16. I think they could do it, just like I said, but it's going to be very tough. And Iowa State, the way that they've played down the stretch, I was kind of iffy on them in the middle of the Big 12 season when they were winning games but not winning by a lot. They weren't very consistent offensively. Their defense looked a little suspect, but they have gotten better and better and better. And the four hottest teams in the country right now are in this bracket with UConn. With all the four conference championships, the SEC champion, the Big East champion, Big 12 and Big 10 champion. So it is going to be a game off of momentum with this East region, just like Nathan said. I'm going to stick with the UConn Huskies advancing to the Final Four.
Yeah, for me, I have Auburn upsetting UConn. I just think Auburn has, like I both pointed out, the best opportunity to do that to UConn, give them a run for their money, and I think they do. Then I also have Iowa State playing Auburn. I think there's a chance Iowa State loses in that second round matchup, whether against Washington State or Drake. I have Washington State in that matchup, but I think Iowa still prevails there and ends up playing Auburn. But I have Auburn getting the best of Iowa State just due to their depth and the fact they get down and play defense. I think much better than a team like Iowa State has done all season. Moving on to the West region, guys. Three different picks. Any first round upsets or upsets in later rounds you see?
Oh yeah. I'll go ahead and go. This was the 5-12 matchup I actually took. The St. Mary's Grand Canyon game. I think Grand Canyon is poised to get the upset. St. Mary's relies heavily on their defense. They struggle offensively at times. Grand Canyon has some terrific scorers, and I think if they can get in the groove, I think that's a very plausible upset. I also looked a lot at Dayton, Nevada. I've been back and forth between that one. Right now I have Dayton getting the win. But I know I didn't take this other pick for a reason because I know this is Alex's favorite pick, and I'll let him have it. And I really hope Gray doesn't take it because
go ahead, Alex, because I probably am.
Yeah. So I have New Mexico winning in the round of 64 against Clemson, and I have them actually getting all the way to the Elite Eight to play North Carolina. I think New Mexico, when we talked about it earlier with just me and Nathan, I had said New Mexico was one of my surprise Final Four team I had. I don't have them making the Final Four, but I think they're a very good team. They got 3 good guards and House, Dent, and Mashburn Jr. And they have a good forward in JT Toppin, who's actually the brother of Obi Toppin. So they're a very, very good team in the starting lineup. I think they make a deep run in this tournament. They're coming off a hot streak in the Mountain West tournament where they surprisingly ended up winning that, and I believe probably ended up stealing a bid to the tournament. So I think they're going to ride that high and get all the way to the Elite Eight. I think Alabama Charleston's a pretty trendy pick that people are doing just because Alabama's struggling going into the tournament, and Charleston's on like a 20-game winning streak or something like that, and they're shooting the ball much better than Alabama. I didn't pick it, but that's just something people are looking at going forward.
Yeah, I really like the New Mexico State pick. I have them getting
It's New Mexico,
16.
then New Mexico State.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. New
Yeah.
Mexico. Yeah,
I know
Mexico
you're gonna
State.
get flashbacks.
I'm sorry. I'm really interested in the Dayton, Nevada game because Dayton's the 7 seed, Nevada is the 10 seed. Nevada is actually favored in that game by 1.5. So I think that really is the toss-up game. It's the definition of a toss-up game here in this tournament, especially with the lower seed being favored. I think Arizona's got a tough path ahead of them. No matter who comes out of that game, that's going to be a tough one after a rock fight against Long Beach State, who just won 5 straight games after their coach got fired. I think whether it's Clemson or New Mexico or Baylor, I think any of those could beat Arizona. I actually have the Baylor Bears going all the way to the Elite Eight, beating Arizona in that game, and then playing the North Carolina Tar Heels. A game that I'm very, very interested to watch is Mississippi State versus Michigan State. Mississippi State coming off of 2 good wins in the SEC tournament and almost beating Auburn in the semifinals. In a very good game. They're playing the best basketball at the best time right now, just kind of squeaking into this tournament, playing against the Michigan State team, who, just like you mentioned earlier, Alex, we were talking about the bubble teams, very, very highly regarded at the beginning of the season, did not play well throughout the season, but they still have Tom Izzo as their coach. They're still
can't
Michigan
get that
State.
against Izzo.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be a tough matchup. I'm still back and forth on that one, but I'll probably go Michigan State as of right now.
That's why I went.
And then the Alabama Charleston game, everybody listening to this, bet the over. No matter what it is, if it's 260, bet it, because these 2 teams can shoot, these 2 teams can score, these 2 teams can run, and these 2 teams don't defend very well, or at least at this moment right now. So I'm very interested in that. 2 teams from the opposite side of the country going to the complete opposite side of the country. Just like Auburn and UAB and UConn and all of them. But I think this West region is very, very interesting, and I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Yeah, looking at the Dayton Nevada game, great. The way I made that pick and the way I make a lot of the picks from a toss-up is who has the best player in that matchup. It's Dayton, Deron Holmes. That's probably one of the best power forwards in the country. Yeah. So that helps you out. Hopefully it helps you out, other people, but that's why I make my pick there. So Gray had Baylor and North Carolina in the Elite Eight, right? And I had North Carolina and New Mexico. Nathan, who do you have in this Elite Eight matchup?
Okay, well, let me walk you through this. So I'll go start with the bottom first. I had New Mexico advancing to play Baylor. Unfortunately, I had to give Baylor the edge there. I like the way they defend. They have sparks offensively. I'm sorry, Alex, I couldn't do it. and then I had Arizona getting by Dayton. And then I had Arizona beating Baylor. I think that's a very defensive, very heavy matchup. I think Arizona's front court is just slightly better than Baylor's, so I had to give them the edge. I actually had Mississippi State advancing. I like the way Chris Jansen's been coaching past few years, very physical. And I think Mississippi State is one of those teams you can just see them bullying people around on the court. I don't know if this Michigan State team is actually prepared to play in March. I know we talk about Tom Izzo being their head coach and what he's done throughout March, especially at lower seeding. I don't think this is a year for him. So I had Mississippi State advancing to play North Carolina. I think North Carolina gets that win. In the second round, I had Alabama playing Grand Canyon. I gave Grand Canyon that upset. I had Alabama winning there. To play North Carolina, and me being the desperate Bama fan I am, I had them upsetting North Carolina. I think if there is a team to do it, I think Alabama can. They had the offensive firepower capability to do it. North Carolina has had times where they had struggled late in the season finding offense, but It's not a popular pick, and there's a reason. It's because Alabama has continuously struggled. But I did have Alabama advancing to play Arizona, and we already saw that already. And Alabama has zero front court whatsoever. So I had Arizona coming out of the West. As of right now, I'm probably going to change it. I don't know what to do. It's a very complicated
Tough one.
region.
Yeah. Moving over to the next region, guys. Or Gray, did you have North Carolina beating Baylor?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, because I had North Carolina beating New Mexico, obviously.
Yeah.
I couldn't ride the Lobos that long.
North Carolina homers over here.
Says the one that picked Alabama. Okay, whatever. We'll move on to the South region.
I didn't have him coming out of the region.
So, guys, you look at the South region: Houston, Marquette, Kentucky, and Duke being the top 4 seeds. Any upsets you have in the first round or any rounds after that going into the Elite Eight?
Yes, absolutely. I'll take the 5-12. Easy, no questions asked. James Madison is beating them and beating Duke to advance to the Sweet 16. Look, this James Madison team is very, very good. I think Wisconsin is a little, I don't want to say they're overrated because they're a good basketball team, but I think they're a lot of people are a little too high on them. They won that Purdue game on an impressive shot. And then it kind of got, I wouldn't say pushed around by Illinois, but that score made it a little closer than that game actually was in the Big Ten championship game. So, and I think James Madison is playing the best of that region right now because I don't think Duke is worth a crap. After watching Cormac Ryan go in there and just shut them up, I don't think Duke's worth anything. I do think they beat Vermont, but lose to James Madison. Really like the James Madison pick in this bracket.
Alex, you can go next.
So I think NC State does beat Texas Tech. Yeah. NC State's riding hot. DJ Burns, DJ Horn. The DJ's playing some really good basketball. Casey Morcell's playing really good. He's a really good defender. Muhammad Diarra, he was playing some of the best basketball I've ever seen him play, rebounding basketball really well. So I think they get the upset over Texas Tech. Don't think they upset Kentucky just because Kentucky's offensive firepower can't keep up with that. So I think they're Cinderella, quote unquote, run-ins there. But one matchup I think that could benefit, that I think is going to happen later in the tournament that's going to foster an upset is going to be Marquette versus Florida. I think Florida ends up beating Marquette. Tyler Kolek's dealing with an oblique injury. He probably will play that game or probably will play the entire tournament. But also guys like Stevie Mitchell and Oso Ighodaro are dealing with injuries as well. So they're really banged up, similar to a team like Kansas. So I think going to play a team like Florida who has elite guard play with Zion Pullen and Walter Clayton, I know they had their big man go down with a horrific injury. But I think they get the best of Marquette and upset them there. I think they'll end up playing Kentucky, but I don't think they get past Kentucky because once again, Kentucky's firepower is too much on the offensive end. So that's my big upset is Florida in this region getting past Marquette to get to the Sweet 16.
All right. So hear me out, Alex. NC State. I know you love NC State coming off.
No, I don't love NC State. I tolerate NC State.
Yes, we do love NC State.
I'm not a big
because they are going all the way to the Elite Eight. They are the two DJs are going to be a dynamic duo.
I love it.
And I hope you know I did this just to spite Alex because of the North Carolina game and how much he hates DJ Burns. So I had them getting past Kentucky. I did have Florida upsetting Marquette as well. And then I had NC State getting past Florida because Florida doesn't really have much of a front court anymore due to injuries. And DJ Burns, you got to stick with him. Unfortunately, I have
not hard to miss him. I mean, he's a pretty large character on the court. It's not really hard to miss him. If you miss him, you get your eyes checked.
Yeah.
Now let me ask. Okay, sorry, Nathan. I cut you off.
I'll go ahead and get this out. I did have Houston coming out of this region. I like the way they play defense. Probably on the verge of the best defense in the country. They also have a very good offense because of their defense. They create a lot of points on turnovers. And I got to stick with Kelvin Sampson. He's been a good coach for some time now. And I think this might be their year.
Nathan, you said when we were talking about in the first bracket with the 215 with Iowa State and South Dakota State that you liked that one. if there's a 215 that I am in favor of,
It's too obvious.
it's this one with Western Kentucky beating
Yep.
Marquette.
That'd be the one I
Because,
pick.
I mean, first of all, I'm not picking that. I'm gonna pick Marquette, but I'm picking anyone who comes out of the Florida, Colorado State or Boise State or something. Colorado,
Yes.
Colorado,
Boise
Boise State.
Either one of those three beats Marquette. Either one of those three beats Marquette. Marquette is a fraud in this bracket. I think NC State, Kentucky, whether it's James Madison or Houston, they got the best draw to have Marquette as the 2 seed in this bracket, and even to have Duke as the 4 seed. Those are 2 teams that are not playing the best basketball right now at the time. Two solid basketball teams, but they just have not been playing the best ball right now. So I think they got real lucky with that one. I do have Houston advancing over NC State in the Elite Eight game because I think NC State runs through Kentucky. I think that would be hilarious to watch.
The DJs.
Because the DJs will do it, but I do have Houston coming out. That's the best defense in college basketball. I know they just got run through by Iowa State. That's probably not a good thing if you're talking about if you're one of the other teams in this Houston bracket, because Kelvin Sampson will use that and use it, and they will win 4 straight games no matter who they play.
So I have Houston and Kentucky in the Elite Eight here. Houston getting the win. I don't think NC State gets that far. I was even tempted to pick him in the first round. For some reason, they remind me of that Georgetown team a couple of years ago that made that big run in the tournament and ended up winning. Everybody's like, upset in the first round. Picked them to go, I think, all the way to the Sweet 16, and they screwed me. So I'm always weary of those picks when they win their conference tournament, make that big run. So I don't want to make them all the way to the Elite Eight. So right now I have Houston, Kentucky, Houston getting the win based off their defense. Moving on to this last region, guys, the Midwest with Purdue as the 1 seed, followed by Tennessee, Creighton, and Kansas. Any upsets here, first round or onward?
Central.
Yes, this is upset
Central.
Yes.
All right, let's just go through. TCU will beat Utah State. McNeese will beat Gonzaga. Sanford will beat Kansas. Oregon will beat South Carolina.
Yep. Do we all have that?
Yeah, I have that.
Are we all okay? We're in accordance with that. I have McNeese State going all the way to the Elite Eight. Because
Purdue.
I don't know. Purdue always just finds a way to crap their pants.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, McNeese State, they just I gotta give credit to Will Wade. I hate Will Wade, but I gotta give credit to him because of the way he's coached that team this year. They have been very efficient on the offensive end. They have defended it extremely well. And if there's anyone that could create a game plan to stop Zach Edey, I think Will Wade could be that coach. In McNeese State, even though I want to pick them to go to the Final Four because I think it'd just be funny. And I don't know. I don't think Tennessee gets past Creighton. I think that Creighton is just too well built of a team. Trey Alexander, I think he's probably my favorite player on that team, even though you can go down the list of whoever can score the basketball on that team. I did have Creighton coming out of this region. Hurt me because I don't really like Creighton. But like teams like Texas, I don't think can keep up with Tennessee.
7 seed.
Yeah, it is insane.
They're a 7 seed and NC State's an 11 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that big of a jump?
We can have a whole separate thing talking about seeding because it's crappy.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Oregon over South Carolina feels right, but then you go into the second round here, and you're looking at Oregon, Creighton. I can't give it to Oregon. Oregon shouldn't be here in the first place, but I do think they have a little bit of momentum left. South Carolina's not a very good team. I'm sorry if they're not.
They don't have that guy. I know Michi Johnson sort of is, but he's really not.
He hasn't stepped up. So yeah, I had Creighton and McNeese and the Elite Eight, and then I had Creighton coming out.
Great. What about you?
So, I have the upset central, just like we just mentioned. But I did have Purdue advancing to the Elite Eight to play against Creighton. I think the Creighton and Tennessee matchup in the Sweet 16 is my second favorite outside of UConn and Auburn. Because if Dalton Connect is playing like we've seen him play, that's going to be a great game. But if he doesn't, Creighton will beat them by 25 because Creighton is consistent. Creighton shoots the ball well. They're good enough defensively to where if Connect is not, if Connect doesn't go for 35 or 40, they're good enough to beat them. But if Connect is playing well, that's just going to be a great battle offensively, going back and forth between Trey Alexander and Baylor Shireman and Dalton Connect and Ziegler and those guys. I think that could be a great battle. I do think Creighton comes away with that, and I think Creighton advances to the Final Four over Purdue. Screw Zach Edey.
I guess it's going to be a clean sweep here because I have Creighton and Purdue playing in the Elite Eight, and Creighton beating Purdue there. I think McNeese State's going to beat Gonzaga. Once again, I look at the matchup. For me, it's sort of a toss-up, but I think McNeese State has a better player in Wells at the guard position. Gonzaga really just doesn't have that guy this year. There's no Drew Timme to bail you out in the paint anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think they well. They get up and down the court. Kansas lacks a lot of depth. I think Chor at the big man position is going to absolutely take Hunter Dickinson out of the game. And if Hunter Dickinson's out of the game, Kansas can go ahead and pack it up, head on home. They won't even get close to Samford if he's not doing what he's supposed to do. And then Oregon, South Carolina, like we've all pointed out. I mean, there's nobody on South Carolina I think that can take over a game. But you look at Oregon, Quiznard, I don't know how to say his last name, at the guard position. Also have that freshman in Sheldstall. He's really good. Dante at the big man position. All those guys can take over a game. They did in the Pac-12 tournament. So I think they can be really good, but I don't have them getting past Creighton, obviously. So Nathan, who's your Final Four here? And who do you have?
I had Illinois, Arizona, and then Houston and Creighton. I had Arizona advancing past Illinois. That front court, they're so good defensively. And then opposite here, you flip it over to Houston, Creighton. Creighton's just one of those scenes where they can take down the juggernaut. We saw it earlier. They thumped UConn in the regular season. They definitely could do it. I think Houston's defense is just so good that it just engulfs them. And I had Houston advancing to play Arizona, and then in the national championship, I did have Houston winning over Arizona. I got to stick with their defense. Of course, it's a low scoring game, so I and this is the way I filled out my bracket. I have only tapped the buttons once, and I finished my picks, and that's it. So I'm gonna keep it this way. I'm not gonna make any more changes.
Gray, what about you?
So in the Final Four, I had UConn and North Carolina, and then I had Houston and Creighton. Starting off with the Houston and Creighton game, just like Nathan said, that defense, that will be the best defense Houston has played, or that's the best defense Creighton has played throughout the whole tournament by far. And I got to keep with Kelvin Sampson. That team's really good. Jamal Shed led team. I think he's very great. So I think Houston advances to the national championship, and then golly, I know we saw with this matchup earlier in the year with UConn beating North Carolina back in, what was it, December? Or was it late November maybe? That's a tough one to pick. It really is. I'm going to have to stick with just if UConn has run through Auburn and has run through Iowa State, just like I predicted in the past, I've got to keep with UConn running through North Carolina here and advancing to the championship. But I actually have Houston winning the national championship this year. I think that loss to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship is bulletin board material for Kelvin Sampson. Just like I mentioned earlier, he's going to use it, win six straight games, and cut down the nets in Glendale.
Yes. So my final four, I have Auburn and North Carolina playing each other, a rematch from a few years ago. I think North Carolina gets the payback. They really wanted to win that first one, so they get the payback here and advance to the championship. And on the other side, you have Houston and Creighton. I'm going a little bit different here. I think Creighton goes in and beats Houston. I look at the Creighton starting lineup, have a lot more firepower than Houston. When Houston loses Jamal Shead, if he's not going good, they really do struggle to find their offensive footing. So I think Creighton gets the win. Plays North Carolina in the championship, but I think North Carolina ends up victorious there, cutting down the nets. And so North Carolina, my champion. So we had one North Carolina and two Houstons, correct?
Yeah.
That was who we had. So we will see if any of these brackets even get close to perfect. I doubt. We'll be X's all over them. It won't even be remotely close. But I'm excited for the tournament. We'll be back next week. We'll break down what happened. We'll, I guess, make a Sweet 16 makeup bracket at that point, like they do that every year. So we'll be back to do that. Thanks, everybody, for listening and watching. Students of the Game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.